90 countries worldwide. Because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, Russia, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION. World is one.
Good evening and welcome to Gravitas. I'm Palki Sharma Upadhyay. Let's get started.
Gravitas, presented by Amity University, ranked amongst the top 3% universities globally. Co-powered by Star Health Insurance, the health insurance specialist.
Afghanistan is a land blessed with beauty and cursed with violence. The country is at war. This one was started by the US. But now the US cannot find a way to end it. So it wants India to help, along with other regional players like China, Pakistan, Russia and Iran. The question is, what should India do? Join the talks, we say, but we know it's not that simple. On the talking table is also a terrorist group. The United States wants the Taliban to join the Afghan government until the next election is held. Where does it leave the policy of talks and terror not going hand in hand? Remember, the Taliban is also a group that Pakistan has supported and China has courted. How does India plan to negotiate these imperatives while ensuring that it remains an active player in shaping the future of Afghanistan and the region? On Gravitas tonight, we'll discuss. Also on the show, the Pope wraps up his historic visit to Iraq with a message of peace and love. We bring you the highlights and what's expected next. In Pakistan, the Prime Minister is on a sticky wicket. After a Senate blow and a trust vote, Islamabad is witnessing a political potboiler. In Myanmar, as the crackdown intensifies, new heroes of democracy emerge and exodus begins. Myanmar has asked India to return 8 policemen who are said to have taken refuge in India. And the interview that is being called a knockout punch by Britain's ex-royals, Harry and Meghan Markle, exposing the racism and bullying in Buckingham Palace. We'll tell you all about it. We begin as always with Gravitas Global Headlines.
Yemen's Houthi forces fired drones and missiles at the heart of Saudi Arabia's oil industry, including a Saudi Aramco facility, in what Riyadh called a failed assault on global energy security. The Saudi Energy Ministry said there were no casualties or loss of property from the attacks. At least 20 people killed and more than 600 injured after 4 accidental explosions ripped through a military camp in Equatorial Guinea. According to the government, the blasts were caused by negligence related to the use of a dynamite at the military base. A Thai court has indicted 18 activists for their role in anti-government rallies last year. The protesters facing sedition charges sought resignation of the Thai PM and called for monarchy reforms. Swiss voters narrowly backed a ban on full face coverings in public places, a decision hailed by supporters as fighting against radical Islam but branded as discriminatory by opponents. Iran has released British-Iranian aid worker Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe from house arrest at the end of her 5-year prison sentence, but she has been summoned to court again on another charge, according to her lawyer. UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson has called for Zaghari-Ratcliffe to be released permanently so she can be reunited with her family in the UK. Over 400 Filipino activists took to the streets and rallied outside the presidential palace in Manila, holding banners and demanding the resignation of the president. The protesters blamed Duterte for rising unemployment, poverty, and human rights violations. Haitians took to the streets on Sunday to demand President Jovenel Moïse's resignation. The march was led by Haitian medical workers who are denouncing the killing of a doctor by kidnappers last Sunday. Thousands marched at the U.S. city of Minneapolis as the trial proceedings began for the white police officer charged with killing George Floyd, whose death intensified the Black Lives Matter movement across the world. American goaler Bryson DeChambeau has climbed to the top spot of the FedEx Cup standings with victory at the Arnold Palmer Invitational in Orlando. High winds and rock-hard greens greeted the field at the final round, with veteran Englishman Lee Westwood leading DeChambeau by 1. US Open champion DeChambeau boogied the opening hole, but 2 birdies on the front 9 put him 1 ahead at the turn. Westwood then dropped 2 shots on the front 9 and DeChambeau then reeled off 12 straight pars in a row and sealed an 8th PGA Tour win with a 6-foot putt. LeBron James extended his perfect record as captain in the NBA All-Star Games as his team romped to a 170-150 victory over Team Kevin Durant. James's first pick, Giannis Antetokounmpo, was the star of the show. The Greek freak made all of his 16 shots to reach a game-high 35 points and register the best shooting performance in NBA All-Star history. The Milwaukee Bucks forward was honored with the Kobe Bryant All-Star Game MVP award. James has won all 4 of his All-Star games as captain.
The war in Afghanistan is called the Forever War. Is India prepared to join it? Why do we ask the question? Because India has been asked to, not fight the war, but to help end it. The others on the talking table could be Russia, China, Pakistan, Iran, the US, the Afghan government and the Taliban. What should India's response be? What role should India sign up for in Afghanistan? On Gravitas tonight, we'll discuss what Delhi stands to gain and lose here. Let me start from the beginning. For almost 4 decades now, Afghanistan has been locked in a state of war. Different wars, but war nonetheless. A dialogue for peace began last year. People hoped that peace would follow. So far, that has not happened. The peace dialogue is stalled. The war is very much on. Violence has only increased. The promise of a ceasefire was never fulfilled. In the month of February, at least 257 pro-government forces and 66 civilians died in 1 month alone. The American-led troops in Afghanistan are staring at a hard deadline. 10,000 troops are supposed to pull out by the 1st of May. With no peace deal yet, there is a growing threat of a quote-unquote spring offensive by the Taliban. Apparently, they could make rapid military gains once the American troops are gone. The United States is now making a big push to restart the dialogue for peace, and Washington wants India's help with that. It wants regional powers to have a greater say in the process. At the same time, it wants the Taliban to have a seat at the table. Not just a talking table. It wants the Taliban to join the government in Afghanistan. So what is Joe Biden's plan for peace in this country, and how far is India prepared to go? First, let's tell you what the US is proposing. Since taking office, Joe Biden and his aides have been conducting a review. They have been assessing the work done by the Trump administration. Over the weekend, Team Biden began taking the first steps towards resuming the dialogue. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken wrote a letter. This letter was addressed to Afghanistan's President, Ashraf Ghani. A copy of this letter was shared by a local broadcaster in Taliban, and this letter offers clues on what America plans to do. The first move will be to accelerate the peace talks. They went on the back burner after the US presidential election. So the dialogue that began between the Afghanistan government and the Taliban will now move ahead. It's just that these will not be the only two sides involved. The dialogue will have more players now, which brings us to the second proposal. Blinken wants a United Nations-led peace conference for a peace deal in Afghanistan. The US Secretary of State wants the UN to convene a foreign ministers meeting. This will have representatives from Russia, China, Pakistan, Iran, India, plus the Afghan government, the Taliban, and the United States. Why include so many countries? Blinken believes regional powers, and I'm quoting here, share an abiding common interest in a stable Afghanistan, which is why he wants India involved. Soon after that letter got out, reports say US envoy for these peace talks, Zalmay Khalilzad, the man leading the negotiations from America, dialed S. Jaishankar, India's External Affairs Minister. So Khalilzad and S. Jaishankar had a conversation. Both sides have not said very much about what was discussed, but it's safe to assume that the Afghan peace process came up. Why is this significant? Because this is a major shift. The Trump administration, remember, kept India out. Donald Trump said that all India had done was build a library in Afghanistan. He undermined the contribution of regional powers. He was criticized for depending far too much on Pakistan for a peace deal in Afghanistan. Now, the Biden administration is looking to change that. Secretary of State Blinken is quite direct in his letter to the Afghan president. The United States wants India to participate in the peace dialogue. Delhi, we say, should welcome the proposal. It's always better to have a say than to observe from the sidelines. Now, the most contentious part of America's plan is this one: an interim power-sharing agreement between the Taliban and the elected leaders of Afghanistan. In other words, the US wants the Taliban to join the Afghan government. And that's a huge concession for a group that has not stopped violent attacks. That's also giving legitimacy to terrorism as an instrument of power grab. Reports say there is a proposal to establish a quote-unquote transitional peace government of Afghanistan with representatives from both sides. This will be followed by national elections. It seems like Afghanistan's president does not like the idea. 2 days ago, he said that he is ready to talk, but he believes the only way to form a government should be through an election.
We stand ready to discuss holding free, fair and inclusive elections under the auspices of international community. We can also talk about the date of the elections and reach a conclusion. I advise those who go to this or that gate to gain power is that political power in Afghanistan has a gate, and the key is the vote of the Afghan people.
So Kabul is sticking to its guns, and rightly so. It wants a democratic setup. Why should the Taliban be rewarded with a role in the government after all that they've done? What is the guarantee that they will end the attacks? What explains America's concession? Its desire to exit this war. They turned an entire country into a war laboratory, and now they want terrorists to join the government so that the US can stick to its deadline of withdrawing troops? Yes, there are no easy answers and no easy options for Joe Biden. His government is caught between a rock and a hard place. But this, we say, is a situation of America's making as much as anybody else's. Which brings us to another question. Many questions, to be honest. Questions like, what have the US-Taliban peace talks thrown up so far? What have they achieved in 12 long months? Have all the commitments been delivered upon? Have all prisoners on both sides been released? Has the violence in Afghanistan ended? And most importantly, will the US ever withdraw all its troops from this country? The answers lie in our next report.
The dawn of 2020 brought new hope for peace in Afghanistan. A chance to end decades of violence. An opportunity to achieve some level of reconciliation, with this aspiration in mind. The US and Taliban representatives met in Doha on the 29th of February. They signed a landmark deal with two main objectives. The Taliban agreed not to threaten the US or its allies henceforth. And the US agreed to withdraw all of its forces within 14 months, but with a caveat.
If bad things happen, we'll go back. I let the people know we'll go back, and we'll go back so fast, and we'll go back with a force like nobody's ever seen. And I don't think that will be necessary. I hope it's not necessary.
The 14-month deadline will expire on the 1st of May. And what both sides have achieved in these 14 months is a rather debatable topic. The negotiations have been marred with several roadblocks. The proposed negotiations hinge on the prisoner swap. Kabul is required to free up to 5,000 Taliban prisoners. In return for up to 1,000 security force captives held by the Taliban has released only 845 captives, while the Afghan government has released only 4,400. Insisting that the remaining 600 are too dangerous and should remain in jail. The stalemate continues to this day. The promise of ending violence remains unfulfilled as of August 2020. 3,560 Afghan security personnel had been killed in terror attacks, and thousands more had been wounded. And in October 2020, Taliban insurgents, along with Islamic State terrorists, carried out attacks in 27 locations across Afghanistan, killing 243 people and injuring 339. Among those dead were 23 Afghan soldiers. The Taliban denies allegations that it is behind these attacks. It instead blames Kabul for launching new operations against insurgent-held areas. Another deadlock is over the withdrawal of US troops. America is down to 2,500 troops in Afghanistan. The reduced military support is said to be affecting Afghanistan's efforts to roll back militant advances. Decreased airstrikes and shortage of advanced technology has slowed their ground operations. The Joe Biden administration may have made a blunt new push for peace. But Washington is still in two minds on whether to withdraw the last of its troops by the 1st of May. The US Secretary of State says there will be no hasty withdrawal of troops. A stalemate over prisoner swap. No end to violence and no commitments on the withdrawal of troops. A year since the US-Taliban talks began. The key promises remain unfulfilled. All the peace deal has thrown up is uncertainty on the future of Afghanistan. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
A 20-year-long war, nearly 10 players, numerous negotiations and one goal. peace. Or maybe not. Afghanistan is a playground for power rivalry. For years, it was the United States versus Russia in Kabul, a proxy war that was no secret. Take a look at this report, June 2020, the New York Times. It says Russia was secretly offering bounties for US troops in Afghanistan. There have been numerous such reports, accusations and mudslinging. The United States is now looking to exit Afghanistan militarily. After wasting 20 years and $1 trillion, Russia does not have a clear roadmap for Afghanistan, but there's something that is very clear. America's exit will create a power vacuum in Kabul, one that certain neighbors would be more than happy to exploit. And the only way to check that is by ushering in strong governance in Afghanistan. The US wants India now to play a role in ensuring that. So far, so good. As South Asia's biggest player, there is no other country better suited to do this. India and Afghanistan have a long diplomatic history. The two countries share enormous goodwill, culture and people-to-people contact. But India's pitch in Afghanistan may be queered by two countries. Both have their vested interests in Kabul and a common goal to keep India out. I'm talking about China and Pakistan. Let's talk about China first. It wants a slice of every country, we know that. Afghanistan is all the more special. Look at Afghanistan's geographical proximity to Xinjiang. And now some history. Afghanistan was once seen as a haven for China's Uyghur Muslims. This was between 1996 and 2001, the time when the Taliban was in power. China does not want history to repeat itself. It also wants two other things. One is to protect its Belt and Road interests in the region, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, especially that is one project that it wants to save. It's an approximately $62 billion project, and China cannot risk the safety of the Gwadar port. Reason number two, China wants to keep India out of Afghanistan, and the only way to ensure all of this is by shaking hands with the Taliban. And Beijing is doing just that. In the 1990s, China was anti-Taliban. Today, not so much. In 2016, China joined the Quadrilateral Cooperation Group. In 2019, China invited the Taliban representatives to Beijing. In short, China has embraced this terror group, the Taliban. China has also used its checkbooks to maintain good ties with the Afghan government. Reports say China provided $70 million in military aid to the Afghan government between 2016 and 2018. China maintains that it wants to work with both the Taliban and the Afghan leadership. And the Taliban has thanked China for its support by maintaining a silence on the Uyghur genocide. So the Taliban's increased legitimacy will be in China's favor. It will also make Pakistan happy. Pakistan and the Taliban, we know, are long-standing allies. Islamabad has also been supporting other terror outfits like the Haqqani network. Why? This is Pakistan's way of keeping India out of Kabul. And this is where Pakistani and Chinese interests meet. These countries are co-conspiring in Afghanistan, and there is nothing in it for Afghanistan. In December 2020, 10 Chinese spies were caught in Kabul, a recent example of how China is planting chaos while maintaining a facade of cooperation. China will never let democracy flourish in Afghanistan. It will also eventually try to debt trap this country. China is only waiting for the peace process before it starts pouring in more millions. Now consider all the conspiracy, the careful planning, the backstage deals. Have they queered India's pitch in Afghanistan? The next question is, how far is India prepared to go? There is no doubt that Afghanistan will become, or rather has become, a flashpoint between India and China. Back in the 1990s, India and China were together in the anti-Taliban alliance. Today, China has an outreach program for the Taliban, while India was largely absent from the peace negotiations. And that is not to say that India had no role in this country. India has helped rebuild Afghanistan with roads, with dams, a parliament building, a cricket stadium, scholarships for students, capacity building, and a lot more. Does this translate into political capital? Well, it certainly creates immense goodwill. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi recently held talks with Afghan President Ashraf Ghani. They signed the Shatut Dam Agreement. India committed $236 million to build this dam. Now, the Taliban is said to be part of the Afghan government. India faces the difficult question of engaging with a terror group to help a country find peace. It's going to be a turning point. But like I said, having a say is better than watching from the sidelines. India must join the talks. And talking about war-torn countries, it was a busy weekend for Pope Francis. He arrived in Baghdad for the first ever papal visit to Iraq. He spent the next 3 days covering 1,400 kilometers, visiting 4 cities. It was a whirlwind tour. Christians in the country needed very much. When the Christian culture was systematically dismantled, hundreds were branded as infidels and killed. The Pope hoped to heal some of those wounds and bridge the gap between Iraq's Muslims and Christians. Did he succeed? Our next report will tell you.
He came with a message of peace and love, hoping to be the balm this war-torn nation needed. After 3 full days of crisscrossing Iraq, Pope Francis has returned to the Vatican. His visit was historic, the first ever papal mission to Iraq. The Pope visited 4 Iraqi cities, including Mosul, the now decimated capital of the Islamic State. Wherever he went, adoring crowds greeted him. The government laid out a red carpet in the rubble.
Over the past several decades, Iraq has suffered the disastrous effects of war, the scourge of terrorism and sectarian conflicts, often grounded in a fundamentalism incapable of accepting the peaceful coexistence of different ethnic and religious groups. All this has brought in its wake death, destruction and ruin, not only materially. The damage is so much deeper if we think of the heartbreak endured by so many individuals and communities and the wounds that will take years to heal.
The Pope's next stop was Najaf, Iraq's holy city and home to Grand Ayatollah Ali al-Sistani. The spiritual head of 1.2 billion Roman Catholics met the revered cleric of 200 million Shia Muslims. Almost an hour later, the men emerged from Sistani's humble home. They appealed for peace. But in West Asia, peace isn't spiritual, it's religious. Centuries back, Islam and Christianity fought holy wars on this very land. In the biblical town of Ur, the Pope addressed this. Ur is sacred for 3 religions. It is believed to be the birthplace of Abraham, the father of Islam, Christianity and Judaism.
Hostility, extremism and violence are not born of a religious heart. They are betrayals of religion. We believers cannot be silent when terrorism abuses religion. Indeed, we are called unambiguously to dispel all misunderstandings. Let us not allow the light of heaven to be overshadowed by the clouds of hatred.
For the last leg of his trip, the Pope visited Erbil. He arrived at a sports stadium in a bulletproof open-top jeep. The internet rushed to name it the Pope Mobile. Inside, there were 10,000 people cheering the pontiff with Vatican and Iraqi flags held aloft. Iraq will always remain in my heart, the Pope declared, before ending the Mass with some Arabic flair.
Salam, salam, salam. Shukran.
In Erbil, the Pope also met the father of Alan Kurdi, the boy whose desperate attempt to flee Syria ended tragically on the beaches of Turkey. Kurdi's father thanked the Pope for his message of peace. The papal trip to Iraq beat some tall odds. The Wuhan virus outbreak in West Asia, the worsening security situation, and don't forget, at 84, covering 1,400 kilometers in 3 days is no easy task. As he climbed the stairs for the return journey, the Pope turned back for one final bow. Some might say he's done everything in his power. rekindle the spirits of Iraqi Christians, preach the message of love and peace, reached out to his Muslim counterparts. But the key to peace in Iraq may lie beyond the papal realm. After all, when has religion smoothed over political tensions? Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Imran Khan wanted a PR stunt and he got one. After losing the Islamabad seat in the Senate polls, the Pakistani Prime Minister took a vote of confidence in the parliament. He won that vote. But he remains on a sticky wicket. He is bracing for yet another electoral challenge. On the 12th of March, Pakistan's Senate will vote to elect the chairperson. The opposition has united behind one nominee, Yusuf Raza Gilani, and since it enjoys the majority in the Senate, it may very well elect him to this post. As for the vote of confidence, on Saturday, Mr. Khan arrived in Pakistan's National Assembly to test his clout, to dispel suggestions that he has lost the support of the majority of his lawmakers. So he took a trust vote. He secured 178 votes, 6 more than what he needed. Listen to this.
Now I announce the result. 178 members recorded their votes in favor of resolution, and the resolution is passed. Consequently, Mr. Imran Khan has obtained the vote of ruling please. 178 members recorded their votes in favor of the resolution, and the resolution is passed. Consequently, Mr. Imran Khan has obtained the vote of confidence from the National Assembly and commands the confidence of the majority of the members of the National Assembly as Prime Minister of Islamic Republic of Pakistan.
So Mr. Khan has won. Perhaps congratulations are in order, but the fact that he's trying to sell it off as a hard-fought victory is a bit absurd. The result of this vote was a foregone conclusion. Look at the numbers. Out of the 340 lawmakers in Pakistan's National Assembly, 157 are from his own party, PTI, 20 others are from allied parties, and there are 2 independents who support the PTI. Imran Khan had to win this trust vote. This was just a political stunt to divert attention away from the PTI's defeat in Islamabad and to show the control Mr. Khan still maintains in Parliament. Outside the Parliament, his goons took care of the rest. I have 3 short videos to show you. They tell you about the dire state of affairs in Pakistani politics. The first one shows Imran Khan supporters heckling opposition leaders. Some of them brought shoes to provoke them. Some of them even got into a scuffle with opposition leaders. Now to the second video. This one shows a shoe getting tossed at PMLN leader Ehsan Iqbal. Watch carefully. And the third video shows one PTI supporter involved in a physical altercation with Shahid Khaqan Abbasi, the man in the black waistcoat. Some of you may recognize him. He happens to be the former Prime Minister of Pakistan. So this is what it has come down to. Former prime ministers being attacked in broad daylight. Forget a vote of confidence. Pakistan needs a vote of conscience. And perhaps China feels it can fill that gap. Chinese representatives in Pakistan are telling people what they should be doing. And this is a completely different story, but you must know what happened. Zhang Heching, Beijing's cultural counselor at the Chinese embassy in Islamabad, recently tweeted a video of a Chinese girl doing what he called the Xinjiang dance. The caption read, "Off your hijab, let me see your eyes." That's an awful statement to make, irrespective of how you feel about the hijab, how you view it. It did not go down well with the people of Pakistan. There were 1,000 tweets condemning this post. The man had to delete it. But it does not change a thing. Thousands of Uyghur women are being subjected to such derogatory treatment on a daily basis in China as the Prime Minister of Pakistan feigns total ignorance about the issue. His silence may be keeping China happy, but it's not helping Pakistan's economy. Not getting any more concessions from China. Pakistan's debt-GDP ratio has reached 87%. That's 10% more than the ideal ratio. In 2013, this was 63.8%. In 2019, it grew to 86%, and now it stands at 87%. Islamabad is borrowing more than it can afford. It is sinking deeper into debt with no prospects of a decent GDP growth in the coming years. As we said, a sticky wicket for Captain Prime Minister. And while Pakistan struggles, its iron brother China is keen on giving more headaches to New Delhi. China has cleared a hydropower project in Tibet, close to the border with India. They're building dams on the lower reaches of the Brahmaputra on the Chinese side. Our next report tells you why India has reason to worry.
This was the Mekong River in 2017, flowing through the Thai-Lao border. But in 2 years, these waters just vanished. This river went dry. What happened to the Mekong? The answers lie in these satellite images. Chinese dams have been hoarding the water of the Mekong, while Southeast Asian countries Cambodia, Laos, Thailand and Vietnam are going dry. Now those living along the banks of the Brahmaputra could face a similar fate. Reports say Beijing has green-lighted the construction of dams on the river. They could be built on the lower reaches of the Brahmaputra. These sections of the river fall inside Tibet. Other major projects include the construction of coastal nuclear power plants and power transmission channels. These plans are part of the 14th five-year plan of China. Reports say Beijing could build up to 60 gigawatts of power generation capacity on the river, making it the biggest hydropower project in the world. One that would overtake China's own Three Gorges Dam that produces 22.5 gigawatts of power. India is said to be considering its own plans to build a dam on the Brahmaputra, while there is concern that Beijing wants to control the flow of waters towards India. Bigger problems could be in store. According to a report, environmental groups and Tibetan rights activists are against these Chinese projects. They believe the dams could wreak environmental havoc and have a severe impact on downstream water supplies. One analyst fears that the constant construction could lead to earthquakes and landslides, even submerge land and forests underwater, and endanger wildlife. The dams pose a threat to human life too. Case in point, the Three Gorges Dam. Beijing touted this project as the world's largest dam. It ended up flooding 13 cities, 140 towns, and more than 1,000 villages. According to one estimate, more than 1 million people were displaced. Now, similar concerns are being raised about the Chinese dams on the Brahmaputra. Experts fear they could lead to floods or droughts and cause immense environmental destruction. Bureau Report, WION. World is One.
Coming to Myanmar now, where the endless cycle of violence continues. 3 more protesters have been killed. The death toll has risen to 67. 67 lives lost in 36 days. That's almost 2 deaths per day. The scale of violence has led to armed militias joining hands with the protesters. There are growing fears of an insurgency. There are also fears of an exodus. At least 30 people have crossed over to India in recent days. Among them are 8 policemen. Myanmar wants New Delhi to hand them back. Meanwhile, Australia has become the latest country to act against the army generals of Myanmar. Here's a report on the decision Australia has taken and all the latest developments from Myanmar as of 8th March.
We have reviewed our military engagement, and I announced yesterday that those activities would be suspended. We've also reviewed our development assistance, because one of the things that I do not want to do, and that Australia does not want to do, is to penalise the people of Myanmar. The people of Myanmar, who are amongst the poorest people in ASEAN and who have been dealing with significant challenges for a long period of time.
Australia has suspended its defence cooperation programme with Myanmar as the crackdown on anti-coup demonstrations intensify. From targeting them on the streets, security forces are now carrying out raids to intimidate protesters into giving up. These visuals are from Mandalay. They show armed police officers forcibly entering a university. One of them tosses a grenade-like object inside. As others storm in through the gate, more than a dozen teachers were attacked during this siege. The state media says forces are increasing their presence at hospitals and universities to enforce the law. But their own lawlessness is horrifying. Now take a look at this video. It shows police officials kicking and beating a protester as he lies motionless on the ground. The protester is then dragged into the middle of the street as other officials join in to beat him up. Such brutal use of force is being seen across the country. This video is from Yangon. A peaceful demonstration suddenly turns chaotic as the police begins indiscriminate firing. All the protesters can do is run for their lives. At least 3 people are said to have died on Monday, taking the death toll to 67. In many places, religious figures are out on the streets to demand an end to the violence. At least 200 monks took out a procession in Mandalay on Saturday. And in the city of Myanmar, a crying nun stood in front of security forces begging them not to shoot at protesters. This was Sister Anne Rosa Nutong, who is now being hailed as a national hero.
There's no one to protect Myanmar's people. We have to defend ourselves and help each other as we can't trust anyone. It's not safe. The security forces arrest and beat those they don't like, or worse, they kill them.
The situation in Myanmar is extremely volatile. There are fears the protests could soon turn into insurgency, because armed militias like these are springing up in support of protesters. This is the Karen National Liberation Army, the most powerful militia group in the country. It has been fighting the Myanmar government since 1949. It is now escorting teachers and students to protest sites in the city of Dawei. Former insurgents from this group are carrying out processions in the country's east. They are helping people flee the violence. At least 30 people have crossed over to India in the last few days. Among them are 8 policemen who are said to have taken refuge in the Indian state of Mizoram. Authorities in Myanmar want India to hand over these policemen. The Indian Foreign Ministry is yet to take a decision. It says it's still ascertaining the facts. But one thing's for sure, the exodus of refugees from Myanmar has just begun. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's marathon interview is out. It was billed as a bombshell and it's definitely living up to that hype. What started as a family tussle has now revealed the dark side of British royalty. Meghan Markle claims that she was bullied, that there were questions raised about her first child's skin colour. At one point, she even struggled with suicidal thoughts. The palace is yet to comment on these claims. How the family response could shape the future of British monarchy.
I just didn't want to be alive anymore. That I came to understand that not only was I not being protected, but that they were willing to lie to protect other members of the family.
Did you make Kate cry?
No. The reverse happened.
Trapped within the system, like the rest of my family are.
And also concerns and conversations about how dark his skin might be when he's born.
The mask is off. The centuries-old royal pretense shredded by two of its own, by the prince and princess in exile, Harry and Meghan Markle. It's all Britain could talk about for weeks. A tell-all interview set across the Atlantic. There were indications that the couple would not pull any punches, but not many expected a knockout. The allegations leveled against the royals are serious. They range from lying and bullying to outright racism. The relentless tabloid attacks were taking a toll on Meghan. The royals knew what was happening, but they never bothered to reach out.
We had to go to this event, and I remember him saying, "I don't think you can go." And I said, "I can't be left alone."
Because you were afraid of what you might do to yourself?
In fact, they compounded her misery. One conversation in particular stands out. This is from Meghan was pregnant with her first child, Archie. There were murmurs inside Buckingham Palace. Would the baby's skin be dark?
In those months when I was pregnant, all around this same time, so we have in tandem the conversation of he won't be given security, he's not going to be given a title, and also concerns and conversations about how dark his skin might be when he's born.
Buckingham Palace did not want Archie to be awarded a title or even security. Was being the seventh in line to the throne of England not enough? Or was the pull of colonial racism too strong to shake? There were shades of Princess Diana as Harry and Meghan talked about their exile. In 1995, Diana talked about her loveless marriage in an equally explosive interview.
How this has panned out.
25 years later, her son is talking about a loveless family. The interview has divided social media. Tennis star Serena Williams was quick to cheer Meghan Markle. She said Meghan's words illustrate the pain and cruelty she suffered. TV personality Piers Morgan called it a plot against the monarchy. Britons too can't make up their mind. Good that palace politics is not shrouded in secrecy. Bad that dirty linen is being hauled in public. Until now, this was a battle of perception. But Meghan's allegations have changed that. Sovereign immunity cannot be a cover for racism and bullying. The royal rebuttal is still awaited. As serious as these allegations are, there seems to be an inevitability to them. Here is an institution that refuses to change, that reinforces rigidities with each generation. For a family that believes in merit by birth, equality and justice may naturally seem alien. Bureau Report, WION, World is One. How can I possibly wrap tonight's show without talking about the day's most trending hashtag, International Women's Day? It is the 8th of March, a day dedicated to celebrating women, our successes, a day meant to highlight the challenges we face. The world today is marking Women's Day, some in celebration, some in protest. There is an outpour of wishes online. Phones are buzzing with endless WhatsApp forwards. Retailers and restaurants are cashing in on Women's Day. Offices have dress codes. Gifts are raining. So are flowers. The whole idea is to make women feel special, even if it is just for today. I've spoken at length about the history of the 8th of March, how this day came to be known as Women's Day. In case you missed it, the latest episode of Gravitas Plus is on our YouTube channel. Go watch it. Tonight, let's try answering one question. It's 2021. How far have we come? How far have women come? In India, there was a time when women practiced sati long ago. A widow would throw herself on her husband's pyre or be forcibly thrown into it. Sati today is banned. But widows are still ostracized. The society has made some progress, but not enough. There was a time child marriage was rampant. Today it is outlawed. But according to one report, 27% of girls in India are married before their 18th birthday. 7% are married before the age of 15. Today, in theory, women are at par with men. at least in most countries. How much of it translates into practice? Let me show you. It is 2021 and women in Tokyo are still fighting for equality. This happened earlier today. The slogan being chanted is "Stop power harassment, stop sexual harassment." In Australia, women are calling for respect. Now look at this banner. It reads, "Patriarchy is worse than the pandemic." Well, it is. A pandemic ends at some point. What about patriarchy? There seems to be no end. There is no count of the number of lives it claims. In the Philippines, women today are protesting human rights violations. In Turkey, women were protesting China's treatment of Uyghur women. These women are highlighting the treatment being meted out to their mothers and their sisters. Paris. Women were protesting the gender pay gap. Did you know women earn 77% of what men do for the same job, for doing the same job? Inequality is so deeply rooted in our system that sometimes we refuse to even acknowledge it. Discrimination against women seems only normal.
Rémunérés, pas valorisés. Il se trouve que la pandémie a permis de mettre en lumière leur importance. Donc on est là vraiment pour crier haut et fort que ces métiers doivent être revalorisés, que les salaires doivent être augmentés.
Madrid banned Women's Day marches. Despite that, hundreds of women took to the streets. They risked their lives and the pandemic just to protest. Why do you think they did that? Well, here's a bitter truth. Women around the world are desperate to get the rights they're entitled to. They have been fighting for far too long for the most basic of rights: equality, safety, the right to work. Article 14 of the Indian Constitution says the state shall not deny any person equality before the law. Last year, the government of India told the country's apex court, male troops will not accept women commanders. And many people in India found nothing wrong with this. There are still many temples that do not allow women of menstruating age to enter. In Nepal, women still die in menstrual huts. They're cold and hungry. They do not have access to proper health care, as a result of which there is a rise in the number of cervical cancer cases. In Afghanistan, women journalists are still attacked. In Pakistan, women are attacked for protesting on Women's Day. In Bangladesh, women sex workers are denied a proper funeral. In El Salvador, women are jailed for miscarriage. In Argentina, women are killed because they are women. This may sound like a rant, but I'd much rather be saying this than sharing cupcakes. Nothing wrong with them either, just so that we're clear. The point I'm making is very simple. Discrimination against women is a reality, a universal reality. Yes, we have come a long way. Women today are leading countries. They're leading global companies. Women in media are leading newsrooms. A lot of women today have a voice. We are independent. We can drive, we can fly a plane, we can join the military, we have access to the best of education. But this is not a privilege. This is a right. So while we celebrate the road we've traveled so far, let's not lose focus on the road ahead. This Women's Day, let's strive for a bigger change. I'm going to wrap on that note. Up next, Gravitas Images. Thanks very much for watching.
Reporting from the line of fire is about instinct. It's about sensing the hostility.
Tear gas has been ongoing throughout the day.
You are not going to pull out of NATO.
And standing your ground for a bit longer.